Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your co-host today along with Molly Painschab. Today we speak with SUGARx Global co-founder Anna Fruehling. Anna Fruehling has actively pursued training for food addiction from various sources. She is a certified health performance coach, a Primal health coach, and she got her certification from Holistic Medicine for Addiction certification, as well as her sugar certification with Bitten Jonsson. She also attended Dr. George Eadie's class on keto for mental health. She is co-founder of SUGARx Global. She is also author of a book, An Altered Spirit, The 12 Steps of Ebenezer Scrooge, published in 2021, with all proceeds dedicated to supporting organizations that support children of alcoholics. Not only does she talk the talk, but she also walks it. She is a recovering addict with 35 years clean and 8 years clean from food addiction. Welcome, Anna, to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We always like to start with the personal story. So if you could tell us what your aha moment was around sugar and food addiction.
I'm Italian and I grew up in San Francisco, and I was always like thinking about food, eating food, whatever, preparing food. I was addicted to the whole food thing and didn't know it. And I was listening to Bitten Jonsson. It must have been And I'm not sure how long I've been clean from food because I didn't really pay that much attention, but I think it was the second time that she interviewed with Mike Collins that I heard her. And from that day forward, I have not had sugar in any way, shape, or form, but I already wasn't eating much sugar because of 5 autoimmune diseases. And I was already a Primal health coach working with people to help them limit sugar intake and eat more in a way that's in alignment with good health and that doesn't trigger you to eat a lot. So I didn't have the kind of withdrawals I think that a lot of people have. But when I heard her say that sugar was the gateway drug, and I heard her talking about her experiences with having other addictions and addiction as one disease with many outlets, I was just like, whoa. And I'm not the kind of person to write letters or email anyone or fan club anyone or do any of that stuff. And I actually emailed Bitten Jonsson that day. And I was like, thank you so much for sharing what you shared. This is the missing piece of my puzzle. I believe I told her that at 9 years clean, I was suicidal. And looking back after hearing her interview, I knew it was the food. And then she told me she was going to be bringing HMA she did a sugar on me. She just wanted to do a sugar on me, and I could see everything. I could see that at 3 years old, I hopped up on the kitchen counter, looked over my shoulder to make sure my mom wouldn't see me, and ate baby aspirin. And I think I would have eaten the whole bottle if it weren't for the fact that my mom must have known something about me. And she told me that it was poison and that it could kill you if you ate too many of them.
And that was baby aspirin that you thought was candy or something, right?
No, I didn't think it was candy. I knew it was medicine, but I wanted it because it was tangy and it was sweet. And I was raised in San Francisco. And by the time I was 9 years old, I had been introduced to pot. And by the time I was 13, I was a full-blown addict. And I don't think I had a day clean until I was shipped to North Platte. I was going to be turning 17. And I went through detox, not knowing what detox was, because I didn't know what addiction was. And so my aunt, she got this woman without any warning labels to go to beauty school because she taught at a beauty school. So I had been kicked out of high school at 14 because my addiction was so bad. I had failure non-attendance because all I was doing was pursuing my use of drugs. And it was really easy in San Francisco. The culture was there. So the Bay Area was full of it.
So your first history really was a drug history.
Well, to me, the candy or maybe aspirin was sugar.
Yes, already signs there. Yeah. When you got clean from drugs 35 years ago, It took you until you heard Bitten to twig about the sugar piece?
Absolutely. And I was trying to control it for years. I would exercise. I would be good all day. I don't know how many times I joined Weight Watchers. I think I had a lifetime membership at one point. I did that walk of shame all the time, which that's what I call it. I think the scale is an evil apparatus, personally. but I tried all the things, and I would give in at night. And I realized now that I acted exactly like I did with my drugs. I was married to a junkie. And when I got clean, I told him, I'm getting clean. And if you want to get clean with me, fine. If you don't, get out. And he stayed clean for 4 days. And then I filed for divorce. I made that decision. 23 years old with 2 kids, and I'd never even paid a bill on my own. It was a very scary time, but I did it. And I think that I had to have a vision of my life that was greater than the suffering that I knew would be required to heal. But I could see that with my ex-husband, I would try not to use, and then I'd be like, please get me something because I had PMS and I had cramps, or I'd have some excuse. And so with my husband, who I'm still married to, I would do the same thing with food. Oh, I'm working so hard. I'm working double shifts as a nurse to put you through school. Can't you just bring me home? Just go pick me up a pint of Ben and Jerry's and sour gummies. I'll quit tomorrow. And I was saying these things. And then I was numbing out on the couch, eating this crap and acting the same exact way as I acted with drugs. And so to me, it's not the substance, it's the brain.
And how did you stumble upon the keto plan? Because that was...
I didn't stumble upon it. I was a Primal health coach already. And Mark Sisson is one of the oldest advocates of primal eating. And he was talking about keto long before almost anyone else was.
Yeah.
And because I'm in his training, I was completely aware of it. And I was already doing autoimmune paleo because I have 5 autoimmune diseases. And I thought, what will happen if I lower carbs? And I lowered my carbs, and I got a lot of peace between my ears and things like that I didn't know what was happening because I wasn't aware of the addiction piece. Yeah. I also had a lot of healing, and I was able to get off of all of my medications for some time. And I was off of them for years until I got my first bout with COVID, and I got long COVID, and all of my symptoms came back. I think COVID affected my immunity. It wasn't even a very bad case, but after I had it, within a week, every joint in my body hurt. So I'm back on medication. So I'm not one of these people that are going to tell you that food is going to cure the world, and it's going to be, but I can tell you I'd probably be in a wheelchair now if it wasn't for keto. But keto to me is such a brain healing way of eating. And when I say keto, I'm really talking about ketosis. I'm not talking about a diet, because people can be in ketosis on a good amount of carbs, depending on their metabolic health. So someone could eat, say, up to 150 carbs a day, and they're probably going to be able to be in ketosis if, say, they're a marathon runner or something like that, right? Because they utilize fuel differently than me, who exercises a few times a week at the gym on weights and takes walks and maybe sprints once a week. The effect on the brain is huge, I think.
We get a lot of questions in the Facebook group about, will sugar help my immune system, help my autoimmune diseases? Would you mind sharing just a couple of those conditions?
Yeah, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have Sjogren's disease.
Wow, these are pretty curious.
I have I have seropositive RA with the highest numbers my doctor has ever seen. He actually considers me a miracle. When I was first being treated, I couldn't even stand up straight or get myself out of bed.
Yeah, so for people listening, that your quip about wheelchair is actually quite realistic.
It is realistic. Yeah. Arthritis is the #1 cause of disability in the nation. And so the last autoimmune disease I found out about that I had was celiac. And I found out because I'm an avid reader. I saw your post where you were reading in your bedroom at 14 or 15 years old. And I read Gone with the Wind when I was like 7. So I'm a reader. Yeah. And I was at the library and I saw a book, Celiac, The Hidden Epidemic. And it said in the book, if you have any of these conditions, you should be tested for celiac. And I had 5 things on the list. I had Raynaud's, I had horrible migraine headaches as a child, and I still had occasional migraines, the RA, all my other autoimmunity, whatever. So I went and got tested, and I tested positive. And so I got rid of the gluten, and within a week, it was like the Tin Man got oil. And you guys, I was on 30 milligrams of prednisone, and that was a step down from the 50 I started with for 3 years.
That's incredible.
With immune suppressants, with methotrexate, with every drug that you could imagine for rheumatoid arthritis at the time. I was on it with no relief. I had a moon face, hair on my face, the hunchback, the whole 9 yards. I was embarrassed by my body because of the effects of the prednisone.
And that makes you want to eat like crazy as well.
It does. And when I'm on it now, and I was on it last year, all year, right now I'm on 7 milligrams and I'm stepping down 1 milligram a month. But last year I was on it for the whole year and I didn't change my food plan. I kept my food plan the same, but because it's prednisone, right? It's going to affect your cortisol. It's going to affect all of these things, your insulin sensitivity. And so I did put on some weight. So right now I'm probably about 10 pounds heavier than I normally would be. I lost 10 pounds as they stepped down so I had gained 20 pounds. And that's, as an addict, that's a really difficult thing to wrap your brain around and accept. But I had to say to myself, am I going to change my food plan? And am I going to let the diet mentality come in and harass me and turn me into an obsessive compulsive mess? Or am I going to do the next right thing and take care of myself the way I know is best to take care of myself? So that's what I chose to do. And I know in due time, everything's going to go back to the way it was, just not in my time frame. And I think that's a difficult thing for addicts to manage and believe. But what I believe is that it just decreases your inflammation, and keto also increases the energy output from your mitochondria. It also has a huge effect on the hippocampus, which I think is fascinating. The fact that you can gain twice the amount of mitochondria in an area of your brain that's about making decisions and short-term memory and mood and things like that. It's amazing. So to me, it's not about should someone be keto and stay keto for the rest of their lives as addicts. I don't want to make that decision for anyone. I think there's a carbohydrate curve for everyone out there, but should you be able to be a fat burner? And do you deserve to have twice the mitochondria in a decision-making part of your brain so you can make better decisions about your life? Yes. So I believe everyone should do a keto reset. That's my opinion with addiction.
From keto coach work, how did you move into your work now, which is the SUGARx?
Well, Judy called me and she wanted to talk about the sugar. And I like to work with people. And so after I talked to her a few times, I realized I really like this lady. And we see eye to eye on a lot of things. And she seemed like a really fair person. And so originally we were doing it with a couple of other people, including Shen Foreman, who was in my class, but then COVID came along and interrupted her ability because she's an RN and she was up to her eyeballs with COVID. And also Cindy was another one that was with us. And so it ended up with, I just mentioned that I would love to work together with people. And I felt like we could have more of a reach if we worked together than separately. And I felt like I wanted to have more of an impact. And I already had a very thriving coaching business. And quite honestly, I'd make more money on my own because people are still reach out to me. I probably get a text a week from a doctor here in town or from an ex-client, are you still taking private clients? But I don't like working with people individually as much as I like working with groups. I think groups are much more powerful to combat addiction. I think I call it KFUCK radio for myself, that I think that gets in the way when you're one-on-one with someone, the ability to rationalize and justify and this and that, but you can be shocked by something someone says or the level of honesty and transparency someone else shares with can really do something, move somebody into a different direction that they otherwise might not move.
So was that like the driving force behind then working together with David and Judy and putting together SUGARx, that, hey, we're going to group up and then we want to bring groups to people? Can you talk about the philosophy behind SUGARx Global, how you work with clients on that group or in a group setting, and then how that does differentiate from you working with somebody individually?
I think that short-term treatment is really great. It can get you out of a crisis. But just because we quit using a substance doesn't mean we're recovered. And I think that it's a very long process. And the longer I've been doing this, the more I believe that post-acute withdrawal goes on for years in a lot of ways that we don't necessarily recognize until we use hindsight and look back at our own lives and our own experiences to see, oh, there was a lot of fear when I was making these decisions. There was I was wanting to go back to my comfort zone of what was familiar. But our philosophy we came up with before we even started, and that's care. And care is a word that I love because it actually means something or someone that has a special interest in your welfare or your well-being. And I tell people what that word means all the time and remind them that they've got to learn to do that for themselves, because nobody else has time to do it for you. And that self-care is giving the world the best of you rather than what's left of you.
You use CARE as an acronym. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So CARE is connection. And I think that's connecting to your own personal truth, connecting to others, connecting to tools and a philosophy of life that works for you. And then action steps. You have to have a way to find out what action should I be taking. And we talk about the alligator closest to our boat, but we also have tools designed to help people figure out what that is, because your mind is going to tell you to do 100 things, and it's going to tell you that they're all important, and then you're going to do nothing, like a deer in the headlights. So we like to teach people, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just figure out like what's going to make the biggest difference for you. If I could wave a magic wand and tomorrow your life would be exponentially better if you did this one thing, start there. Start with what's really going to matter. And don't worry about getting it all right now. And then recovery protection, which is a phrase we coined because we realized we hate the word recovery protection, or we hate the word relapse prevention. It sounds like you're going to fail and you got to be, and we're more of the mindset that a good general doesn't go out and take all of his guys out on a mission without knowing the coordinates. And it's just our responsibility to say, look, 3 months ahead, what events do I have coming up? Do I have a wedding? Do I have this? Do I have that? What emotional triggers might I have? Is it the anniversary of my dad's death? What's happening that I might be able to be prepared for? Even making a note to yourself on the calendar as simply as that says, call your best friend and talk about your dad the week that your dad, that you're going to be celebrating that anniversary. And so you have someone to talk to, so you don't just get a case of the funkies. And so we believe recovery protection is like a creative process of creating how you want your life to look. And what would the best situation, how can you handle that situation the best? Just taking a peek forward instead of always worrying about the past and worrying about repeating the past. And then education. And we believe there's a lot of educators out there that don't understand addiction. And so we tell people, put your recovery lenses on, listen to what you want to listen to, and read the books you want to read, but put on your recovery lenses and ask yourself, is this a pretty shiny thing, or is this something I can implement that's actually going to be helpful and useful to my recovery?
So how does that philosophy translate into what SUGARx does? So for somebody who's listening and they're like, I have no idea what SUGARx Global is. Can you describe like the online platform, like how the meetings work, how like what that would be like if I went to a group and you're facilitating? What would be my experience?
Your experience with me is going to be different than it is with Judy or Dave, because we're different people and we have different points of view. But you're probably going to get a lot of the same thing done differently, which is great because novelty is very important to the human brain. And we talk about do the same thing, but do it different. I say if you're bored in your recovery, that's your own damn fault, because you don't have to meditate inside. You don't have to meditate standing still. You don't have to meditate the way someone taught you to do it. One of my favorite meditations is turning on KC and the Sunshine Band and dancing around in my kitchen, because I can tell you every other thought leaves me. I'm breathing, I'm relaxed, and I'm having fun, and I'm right in the moment. And to me, if that's meditation, to me, that's what it is. And so we really like to help people define what is recovery to you, not to someone else, because it really doesn't matter what someone else thinks recovery is. And it's not going to help you to compare yourself to another person. And we also teach them that your idea about recovery is going to change. You don't have to have all the answers for yourself. Recovery is an evolution to me. And I just got done doing Nakin's spiritual principles. And we did a meeting every Wednesday for 41 weeks on Nakin's spiritual principles, because there are 41 of them. And it was incredibly fun and it was amazing. And people are using Nakin's spiritual principles on their cue cards, which we have for recovery protection, where you determine what is your cue, what have your consequences been, and or what were your customs, and then what are your consequences? And you can use like the negative spiritual principles from Nakin to say, I felt jealous, I felt this, I felt that. So you can identify those things. And then on the next side, you've got your new custom that you get to create. What am I going to do now? So we like to really, I think our whole philosophy is opening up options, because we know that addicts, when they get themselves backed into a corner, feel like they have no option but to destroy themselves. To me, addiction is causing harm to yourself. It's feeling like you only have one choice and it's the worst possible choice for you. And you stop even caring because you don't believe that you can do something different.
Yeah.
And so keeping that forward motion and believing you can make choices, you can create choices. And so we're constantly in that mode of creating as many options as we can for ourselves and creating as many positive scenarios for ourselves.
It's amazing. So that's happening in groups. And it sounds like sometimes these groups have a topic or a specific purpose, like the 41 weeks. Now, do you still have the Recovery Accelerator program?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that might be exciting for people to know about. What is the purpose of it? Who's it for? All of that.
I think it's for anyone that wants to improve their recovery or get a good sound knowledge of KFUCK radio and how to combat that, because we have this brain disease where I love what Dr. Paul Early says about it, that it's the most complex illness known to man. And it hijacks every single part of your brain to conspire into supporting this disease, right? And the disease is, I'm going to hurt myself and I don't care. That's what it is to me. I don't know how many, I know you guys have talked to 1 million addicts as well. And almost all of them have said to me, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, it wouldn't matter. I don't care. They've lost their verve for life. They've lost their feeling of aliveness. And so I think when we can show them, hey, it's not you, it's the way your brain has been trained. And no one is born saying, okay, I'm going to train my brain to think positively. I'm going to train my brain to do this or that. We do it by default. We do it by what we see on the images on commercials, by what the parent that told us you're never going to amount to anything or whatever. And these things get wired into us. And then we have the subconscious. So our first one that we do is on mindset. And we talk about how important it is to understand that you've got to change your mindset. And that's what we're working on here. And you've got to open yourself up to possibility. And so our whole first lesson is about that. And then we do a really deep dive into addiction and what is it and what are the symptoms of addiction and that kind of thing. Then we move on to things like automatic negative thoughts. But we don't just teach them these things. We have worksheets and workshops that we do that help them identify their own automatic negative thoughts. And you can't change what you don't know about. Right? You just can't. You find yourself acting in certain ways and you don't know why you're acting in certain ways. It just seems like you just ended up that I don't know how else to act, but some kind of feeling or thought comes before. And then we teach a lot of self-love things. I have a love-hate relationship on our one about love the skin you're in. That's what it's called, because people get so emotional. And sometimes I think we're going to lose people there. And it just kills me because to think that we judge ourselves so harshly by an outside appearance, by luggage, right? This is my luggage. Who cares if it has stretch marks? Who cares how much it weighs? In reality, that's how I feel today, right? And one of my best friends is as big as a house. And I never think about her size. She's an incredible woman. It's not my job to make things that are not important to her. And she gets to decide what's important to her. And I love her just the way she is.
Do you ever wonder if some of that, though, Anna, comes from, because I've certainly questioned this before with my clients as well. And certainly I'm a human being and I'm not immune to having these thoughts cross my mind from time to time as well. And I think in my experience, both personally and professionally working with clients, it's often like an outside voice, whether it be somebody else from like the space of recovery, like making these like verbalized outward judgments about like us and our health and our status of recovery based on what our bodies look like. And I feel like it's just so still rooted in diet culture. And I was just wondering if do you frame it the same way? And if so, like, how do you help then the clients see exactly what you and I are talking about?
We have an amazing slideshow And one of my favorite images shows a woman standing in front of a funhouse mirror. And I think that we don't really see ourselves clearly. Like, we judge ourselves a lot more harshly than others would judge us. But I also think that some people have a lot of damage from addiction. Some people have gotten so big and recovered fabulously and are left with a lot of excess skin and things like that. And I think if I was in a fire and I had burns, I would get a skin graft. So I think that people get to make those decisions for themselves. I think that's a loving and powerful thing to do for yourself if that's what you want to do. I don't think people should have to be saddled with horrible reminders of that there's a lot of things people can't do anything about. I suppose I could get a nose job for this Italian honker that I have, but I'm not interested in having a surgery where I have to breathe through my mouth and being uncomfortable like that. I suppose I could have gotten a tummy tuck, but when I looked into what they do to you, I thought, you know what? I'm not that worried about these stretch marks that I want to go through that. Yes, I've had my battles or whatever. I was in the beauty industry. I watched women put a mirror an inch away from their face that looked like supermodels. They looked airbrushed. They were beautiful. And they would say to me, but what about these pores? See them? And I'd pull the mirror away. What pores? Don't you see them? And this one woman, this is a true story. This really happened. I pulled the mirror away from her and I said, you're beautiful. Nobody looks at you that closely or puts you under that high of an inspection. And she started crying and I think sometimes we look at someone truly beautiful and we think, oh, they've got it together. They've got this great life. But I'm so blessed to just be average. Thank you, God, for making me average. And I'm going to tell you why. Because being in the beauty industry, I saw these women that were stunningly beautiful and they couldn't help it. They had to be extra nice because if you're beautiful and you have an opinion, then you're a bitch, right? And they had to be extra sweet, extra nice. They were worried about losing their looks because that's where their value was. I saw this. I lived in a big enough city, Omaha, Nebraska, and I had a lot of rich trophy wives coming in for makeup and skincare and all of that stuff. And I watched this over and over again. And so I think like we have a lot of opinions about how people feel about themselves. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know that if there's a woman alive that feels truly comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience coaching people through those feelings, those thoughts and feelings that come up in that, and really breaking through that cognitive dissonance and getting them to move forward. So how many weeks is the Recovery Accelerator program?
It's like 18 weeks.
18 weeks. Excellent.
And we give as a gift the sugar and also 2 years of membership into SUGARx Global. What we give them is actually higher value than the course itself, because we want them to have long-term success. We don't want just a little, oh, wow, this was great. I understand. And we really encourage our groups to get together. And some of our original Recovery Accelerator groups are still meeting weekly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then do they have to, do you have certain times of year that you run this program so everybody starts at the same time, or can anybody join at any time?
They can sign up, and then when we have a critical mass, we start the course, and they understand that, but they get to come into the community right away. And we're actually working on a different way of doing it. And so we'll see, because I would love it if people could get started right away, because I think that would be the best case scenario. So we're trying to figure that out right now.
Got it. Yeah. I know there's always that learning curve, right? What works? How do we get the best bang, the best information out to the people who are ready right now, all of that, the business end of things?
We started it as a 9-week course, which was absolutely overwhelming for people. And even 18 weeks is overwhelming. And one thing we also do is, at least currently, is we allow people to go through it a second time at no charge, because we feel that repetition is the mother of all learning. And it's really helpful to people. And what we've heard from our clients is they could zoom out enough now to see what this process was about and to really, appreciate the changes that it makes in their life and why each session is in a specific order. We don't really believe in throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if something sticks. We believe in going deep, not wide, with our clients and challenging them to really dig deep and really not be afraid of pain, because addiction is the biggest pain you're going to have. Active addiction is miserable. I don't think you can avoid pain of change.
Can you actually tell us, like, how many programs do you have? And just a brief outline of that. Yeah.
We have our membership area, which is very many meetings a week. Don't quote me on this, but about 14 groups a week. A couple of them are peer-led. We have all kinds of courses for you on the program. We have, I think, over 14 recovery tools on the program, which we are making into a course so people can really use this one first, do this one next. I think we've learned through experience, knowing your why is very important. That should come first, because if you can have a clear vision, at least not so fuzzy of a vision because a lot of people, I just want to stop using and weigh a certain amount and then I'll be happy. And we know, and you guys know this too, there's no truth to that at all. 1 million women and for millions for however long have gotten to this secret number on the scale and it still wasn't good enough. I say Prince Charming could have come to the door on a white horse and I would have found something wrong with him. Because that's the way the disease of addiction works. And they get that. And so that's our main thing. And then we have the Recovery Accelerator program, and then we have high performance coaching. And high performance coaching really deals with huge categories of life. And it's high performance coaching through Brendon Burchard, which I've been a high performance coach for years and years. And I've been using this method or the system with many people, and it's incredibly successful. In fact, it's got a 99% satisfaction rating, and it's considered the best coaching program in the world. And the reason why is because Brendon Burchard spent a lot of time, money, and research to see what actually works. So he has study after study showing what makes you a high performer. And high performance is what makes you happy. In other words, your ability to decide, how am I going to bring joy to my life today? How am I going to show up for this situation? Because your situations are going to change. That's a fact. Your situations are going to change. You're going to wake up in the morning and some awful thing is going to have happened in the night. And how you show up, if you focus on this is how I show up. Like I have a note on my desk that reminds me that when I leave this office, the second one isn't applicable anymore unless my daughter's home because she's in college. But it says you are now entering the wonderful wife and marvelous mother zone, because I need to switch gears and turn off work and be the person I want to be out there in the world. It matters. It matters because at the end of the day, when I die, I don't want my epitaph to say, oh, she worked so hard and she was so smart and this and that. I don't care about that. It's going to be about the kind of person I was and how I showed up for life and how I made other people feel and that kind of thing. And I think that's what brings a greater satisfaction to everything we do.
How long is that course?
It depends on how long someone wants to be in it. So you can get the 12 weeks. Most of the people, we just launched it a while ago, and most of the people decided they wanted to do the full 48-week course. And so it's 4 different sessions, the high performance habits, and then it moves on to 3 other types of sessions, including leadership. And one thing that I really focus on with my clients in an everyday way is no matter what you think, you are influencing other people because you're a leader, whether you want to be or not, because you've got people watching you all the time. So people have influence, whether they think they do or not. And so I think that's a really important point for an addict to think about. How do you want your daughter to look at you? And that can be a very motivating factor for changing the way you see yourself body image wise, to go back to the body image. You don't want your daughter to crap on themselves over things they can't control, like the girth of their hips. Women come in all shapes and sizes. We don't come in the stretched out supermodel variety for the most part. That is a rare body type, right? There's a lot of pears out there. There's a lot of apples out there. And so for me, I want to show up for my daughter in a way that says, you know what? I'm 59 years old and I'm going to show my arms. I'm not going to wear long sleeves just because I'm aging and somebody might be offended by some saggy skin or something. Like that's not the message I want to send my daughter. And that's really powerful for how I live my life, thinking about how I want someone else to live theirs, somebody that matters to me.
That's a very powerful image. Thank you for highlighting that. The question that comes up frequently in our podcast, because it's so ubiquitous now, and that is the use of the GLP-1. And initially it was, what do you think about them? But now what I'm hearing is, it's actually affecting my practice. So what's your take on somebody who is on a GLP-1, or is it actually affecting your practice?
They've been around for about 7 or 8 years, and a lot of people have been on them. And we have people sent to us by obesity specialists where the person started lying about what they were eating and did this and that because the GLP-1s don't keep the cravings away forever.
Elaborate on that, please. They do initially, but not forever. That's been your experience?
Yes, and actually there was a new report with 800 doctors surveyed that almost every single one of them agreed that they have about maybe if you're lucky, you're going to get 2 years out of them. I believe that it can be a life-saving thing. See, I read your book, Vera, and the person I related to the most was the gentleman who was having heroin and food delivered to him in bed in his art gallery or whatever, right? Yeah. Because that would have been me. It would have been like, bring me my drugs, bring me my food, and I'm just going to lay here and feel sorry for myself and click the TV clicker, right? And numb my life away. And boy, wouldn't a GLP-1 have been a nice thing for him? Who knows if he would still be alive if you could just break that pattern in the brain or reduce the cravings enough to have common sense reign, right? Enough to have a transformation occur. But I think we have to have a map of a transformation. So I don't have a dogmatic opinion on GLPs. I do think people should be aware you double your body fat, you double your fat cells, and you're going to be left with that. If you come off of them or you start eating again, you're going to have twice the fat cells to pack full of fat. And it reduces your lean body mass by 75%.
You lose a lot of protein, which is really scary, especially as you're getting older.
It's incredibly scary because sarcopenia is the cause of death. That's where mitochondria live, and mitochondria are life. And I think it's so interesting that they're visitors. They're not even a part of us. They're almost like these germs that are batteries that live within us. And so that's a lot of, if you come to my groups, you're going to hear me talk about strengthening exercises. You're going to hear me talking about, I know one of the questions you guys wanted to ask me, and I guess this is as good a time as any to address it, is what do you do for a stall? I don't think it's necessary. The first thing I find out is, are you eating enough? Because addicts tend to restrict. They tend to go rogue and they tend to restrict. They feel like they still get that calories in, calories out thing. And most of the time when they add more fat or they add more protein, things start clicking along. I had a very resistant person who had been clean for 3 years, and she was eating 2 meals a day. And I didn't think she was eating enough, and I didn't think she was eating enough fat. She added a meal back, and everything started clicking along. And she had been in a stall for over 1.5 years. And I had been talking to her for 1.5 years, but I wasn't talking to her. I was talking to her addict. Mm-hmm. And that is something so important, right? And that's why I think it requires us to be very patient as practitioners, because that's just the nature of the disease. Denial is a huge part of the nature of disease.
What's your opinion on intermittent fasting, where I believe that it has a very positive health consequences, but is used often as a weight loss tool? What's your thought about that? And how do you advise people when they ask about that?
I don't think fasting in general is for addicts, because restricting and binging is such a huge problem with addiction. And I think that ultra-processed food addiction is the hardest thing to get over as far as addiction goes, because it's so tied with survival. There's no other substance more tied with survival. And I think that we all have to find out how to keep eating. We have to figure out a way to keep eating. That's huge, isn't it? That's a lot.
Except for that's the biggest fear that they have. I hear that all the time. I like to fast because it turns off the food noise. I like being on the GLP-1s. It turns off the food noise. and as soon as I start eating, then I can't stop. So these are the things that clients are saying that we have to show up and be with them in that space. And like you said, talk to that voice inside that's like the fear voice that's saying, oh, all of these things are going to happen, and try to convince them that just on the other side, it is actually okay. But because they haven't seen it, that fear of the unknown, like you were talking about. And how do you walk them through that?
Number one, I always tell people it is normal to want to eat, and you are not going to cure that. You're not going to fix hunger.
Except for how many voices out there, Anna, are saying, that isn't how it worked for all those years. It was feast or famine. We didn't eat for days sometimes or hours.
That's true.
Oh, it's absolutely true. But now I've got clients who are going, I'm doing this all wrong because I'm eating 3 times a day.
No, the thing is, we still have that brain, and now we have to learn how to live with that brain in our environment, because our environment isn't going back to that. Thank you very much. I don't want the environment to go back to that. I don't want to have to hunt and gather and scratch for every bit of food that I have. I'm very grateful to live in these environments, but we do have too much comfort and not enough cave, is how I explain it. And so I think, number one, starting off with 3 meals a day. And actually, I'm going to tell you my favorite food plan is eat enough animal protein and fat until you are satiated. And I don't care how many times a day you eat for the first 3 weeks, because that is going to change your insulin. It's going to change your ghrelin. It's going to change your leptin. It's going to change all kinds of hunger hormones. And you're going to have nutrients that your body's been trying to get. Part of cravings are you're eating crap that isn't nutrient dense. And I joke around because I think humor is really powerful. And so I say, so when you were eating all that crap and binging out on all that crap, were you worried about the ingredients in that? And now you're telling me you're worried about eating too much animal protein, which is an actual real single ingredient food. And they laugh. Because you'll eat this, as Bitten calls it, a chemical shitstorm with a list the length of my forearm. And I don't even know what some of that stuff is, and I'm a smart woman. And you'll eat that stuff, but you're going to think I'm crazy because I'm telling you to eat real food until you're satiated. The number one thing a person needs to do is stop eating things that we know are addictive, period. And then you've got to allow your body time to heal. And you have protein receptors in your gut that tell you when you've gotten enough protein and help to those GLP receptors they're literally agonists. And so they turn on that GLP in your gut and your brain. And if you're under eating those things that turn those off, you're going to feel like you're craving all the time. But I think addicts do mistake hunger for cravings because they don't really know the difference and it scares them. And I also think that it's very important to let addicts know that it's normal for an addict to want to use. We have euphoric recall. I have smelled smells and seen things. My body's going to remember what they tasted like. When I smell fresh baking bread, my mouth might water. That doesn't mean I want to use. It just means my body remembers what it was like to eat that stuff. Just because I have a physical response to seeing something or smelling something or hearing something, for me, it's the crunch, like the Doritos, the Tostitos, that kind of thing. In fact, one night I got off of a meeting where we were talking about sights, sounds, smells, those kinds of triggers. And my daughter called and my husband put her on speaker. And the first thing I heard was the crunch of a Dorito. After I said that was my biggest trigger, and I just had to laugh.
You would basically normalize these hunger experiences or put them into a context that's more manageable.
Less threatening. I saw you change the cover of your book, and I'm going to tell you I had no problem with your original cover.
Yeah, I only changed it in the Facebook group because as I got so much flack for that.
I'm going to tell you something we teach our people is deal with it, because this is a drug you cannot get away with. 80-90% of the food around you is going to be processed food and ultra processed food. Your friends aren't going to change what they're doing. You've got to learn to deal with it. I don't get to change what everybody else is doing. And me being angry and triggered by every time I see somebody, looking at a recipe book or eating something is ridiculous. I go to a 12-step program. Vera, you know what those are like. They think they have to have something to eat at every single one.
Not only that, but I think like allowing that story to continue just builds and creates resentment, and it continues that victim mentality. And the thing is, while you did nothing to cause this, it is not your fault. I 100,000% believe that and will say that till the day I die. It is still our responsibility to take care of ourselves and do what we need to do to move forward. And you're right, like Dunkin' Donuts is not going out of business today. Like it's not. And I'm with you, Anna. That's what we really work with our clients on too, is that you're going to see these images. And despite what some other people out there want to, however they want to frame it and however they want to work with clients, being in the actual addiction medicine world and doing this for, I'm coming up on 2 decades now, Never once in the history of ever have I been able to like fully bubble wrap, shield, whatever, anybody from any of it. They've had to figure out how to walk through the world seeing it the same as my children, who I'm like, you're going to see this stuff. We don't touch that stuff. And here's why, right? And certainly it's oversimplified, but children have to learn it. We can learn it.
Right.
We can
and
do
I
it.
think when you have an anger or a resentment, you may as well dig two graves, because you're not just burying what you're angry at or who you're angry with. You're burying yourself and your ability to have joy and freedom. And
painting yourself into that box or that corner you were talking about.
I don't want to be angry every time someone orders some food I don't eat. That's not my food. We talked about NMF, not my food. And not my food is going to be different than Vera's not my food. And it's going to be different than your not my food. And that's the other thing too. I think like people think that they should carnivore harder, keto harder. No, maybe they're getting back to stalls. Maybe you're not sleeping well. You can't keep the hours of a bat and have good metabolism. It's not possible. It's scientifically studied on women, one of the few studies done with women, that you're going to want to eat 300 to 600 calories more a day. And that's because the THC receptors, they know that now. And that, I find that so fascinating. The same thing that pot triggers for you to have the munchies.
The cannabinoid system, How do you deal with, quote, chronic relapsers?
I don't deal with anybody. I cheer them on. They keep coming back. The stamina that they show. Judy took 13 years before she could recover from one damn cheese curl. I remind them of that. I remind them never to give up on hope. And I also remind them of the progress they've made. The food isn't winning. It's not the food that's winning. It's the reward system that's winning. And it's that KFUCK radio that's winning. But I remind them, hey, look at what you did. Look, you made it another 30 days. A day clean is a day one. I don't even care about people's clean time. It makes no difference to me. I care about how they feel about themselves. And I ask them questions like, how would you feel at the end of the day if you didn't pick up today? And when they start connecting to, you know what, I feel good when I don't pick up. Were you eating enough? Were you eating something that was triggering you? Were you romancing? Dave's trigger-free triangle is one of the most brilliant tools, I think, ever for addiction. The whole idea of debate, romance, and guilt. Because usually those are going to be things that you can understand and you can, if you start to identify those things. But I never want anyone to feel guilt and shame. I say all the time, we don't do guilt and shame at SUGARx Global. And if someone even so much as says, I'm so stupid, I say, excuse me, what did you say in my meeting? Because I have a zero tolerance policy for smack talk on yourself. I call it red dog smack talk. And no, that's not going to happen because that is not an effective tool to recovery. Addiction is guilt and shame. Addiction is allowed to proliferate in our countries because of people's misinterpretation and misunderstanding that it means that somebody is weak and doesn't have willpower. They do too have willpower. They've stayed flipping alive, some of them through horrendous crap. That I've heard stories that would curdle milk about what people have gone through in their lives, and they're flipping amazing. And I think we have to destigmatize addiction. It's a societal problem brought on by our environment, not by the person. I said, too much comfort, not enough cave. We need to get back to learning how to struggle for what matters. And we need to have people matter. Like I said, care. Someone or something that has a special interest in your welfare and your well-being. Those are two huge things, right? Welfare and well-being.
You keep coming back to this phrase of comfort versus cave, and that the cave, which we need to learn to embrace, is like natural hunger.
Natural hunger, community, learning how to communicate with other people, which I teach people communication is the scariest thing we do. Because we're always fearing rejection. We're always fearing that we might hurt someone's feelings. And I tell people, get over it. Of course, you're going to hurt people's feelings and other people are going to hurt your feelings.
And that's part of the cave thing.
We got to try to do better. It just gives us information. We don't have to harm ourselves because of it.
Relapse could be part of that cave too. A person going through a relapse and trying to come out of it.
If someone had a relapse of cancer, am I going to sit there and not nurture them and not help them get through that crisis? No, I'm not going to do that. That would be being a total jerk. And I think it's the same way with recovery. relapse is part of recovery as far as I'm concerned. And people can't relapse until they've had, and I believe this, and I learned it from Bitten Jonsson, and I think you got to have about a 6-month grace period where you've been out of the substances. And at SUGARx Global, we believe you should be out of all the substances, any mood-altering substance. So marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol, the works. We don't believe that it's one reward system. The reward system doesn't care where it's coming from.
Tell us a little bit about your book.
My book is called An Altered Spirit, Ebenezer Scrooge and the 12 Steps. And I first got into 12-step recovery when I was 17, but I didn't work the steps because I thought just quitting was recovery. But that just makes recovery possible. I think that recovery is a process. And the 12 steps are a beautiful process. And they're an individualized process. I think unbeknownst to people that never really work them, they are not dogma. They are not a cult. They are literally something that helps you unlock your own authenticity. And I used Scrooge and Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol to illustrate the transformative power of a little bit of honesty, a little bit of open-mindedness, a little bit of willingness. One of my favorite phrases is when Scrooge says, "Conduct me where you will. I have learned the lessons so far and I'm ready to learn more." After he basically got his butt kicked by seeing himself truthfully and seeing the harm that he caused. But he didn't do it in a way where he wanted to kick himself. He did it in a way that I don't want to forget these lessons. I want to go about being a better person. And to me, Scrooge was addicted to gain. That's what Charles Dickens says. And he capitalizes gain like it's a noun, which I think is brilliant. More, different, better. That's addiction. It can never be satisfied. And he could have had all the money in the world and he still would have been miserable and unhappy.
More,
and that's the nature
different,
of it.
better. Good.
That's what I talk about in the book. And I think that my favorite character has to be his nephew, Fred, who says he's going to give him a chance. Everybody's talking smack about Scrooge. Oh, your Uncle Scrooge. And Fred is, I intend to give him a chance at every turn because he believes in people's ability to transform and change. And I think it takes those kind of people to help someone, right? I think a lot of times addicts ask the wrong people for help. And then they get the wrong solution. And you got to ask you got to ask the right people for help if you want to get help. And I think sometimes that's a process and you have to if I had to give anybody any advice, don't give up. Don't ever give up. Keep going. But I also think that addiction makes us look for those pretty shiny things and look for that perfection. And I would say, get started. Be perfectly imperfect right now. Get started today and don't let your fear of not getting it all right now stop you from doing something different. Because addicts have all kinds of fears. What's my husband going to think when I don't bake all this food? How are my children going to be? They always bake me a cake on my birthday. They're so worried about what everybody else will think. And I think I try to get them to think about what will everybody think when they're taking care of you in the nursing home or when you have an above the knee right leg amputation, because these are real consequences. And I did a thing for Nutrition Network and the statistics alarmed me. We are losing way more people to diabetes. And it didn't say heart disease I didn't even use heart disease, which heart disease is diabetes anyway. That's what my husband says. He's an interventional cardiologist. Most people are dying from metabolic syndrome, right? The amount of people that die from metabolic syndrome or diabetes every year far outweighs the crisis we have with drug addiction and the amount of people dying from drug addiction. It's alarmingly high. People are quite literally eating themselves to death. People need to know that they deserve a better life. And the people that really love them are going to want to have them have a better life. I can't tell you how many people have been surprised by how supportive their families become and their community has become.
Yeah, amazing. I know we're out of time and we just have a couple questions we like to ask everybody at the end. So what's next for you, Anna, individually, but then SUGARx, because I know sometimes those things are separate.
Individually, I'm just going to live my best life now. I literally feel like I have a life I love and I love the life I have. And I think those are two kind of very different things. I don't need my health to be perfect. I don't need my skin to be perfect. I don't need everything to be perfect to be happy right now today. And I'm just going to keep doing whatever it takes to protect that. That's what my private life is about. So life is so short. I once saw a guy take you remember that old computer paper with the dots? And he gave like women 80 dots. And so if you tore off all the dots you've already lived, I don't have that many dots left. I have 20 dots left, and I want to spend them wisely. That's all. I don't want to spend my time worrying about what other people think or don't think about me. I don't think people think that much about me anyway, so I may as well be about living my best life. And then with SUGARx, I'm really excited to just get out there to more people. I think 3.5 years is a real growing stage for a business. And we're just figuring out ways to get out there more and to get more members and help more people. We're terrible at social media and things like that. So we're focusing on what we do well and getting to the people that need to hear from us in other ways. And so we just want to, I think we see SUGARx Global as a leader in addiction, not just sugar addiction, but in the whole idea that addiction is one disease with many outlets. And the idea that any addict, and any is one of my favorite words, and I'm a big definition person, it means without exception, any addict can recover. And we really believe that. And so I think we really attract people that felt such a devastating sense of hopelessness and have tried so many things so many times to no avail. And there's something magical about Judy, Dave, and I together. And I just want to continue to nurture that magic.
Amazing. All right. So before you go, we have a signature question we like to ask everyone. If you could tell a younger version of yourself something about food addiction, sugar addiction, ultra-processed food addiction, whatever label we're going to end up giving it, what would it be?
Never forget that sugar is the gateway drug and all other outlets of addiction stem from it. Never forget that sugar is a potent drug. It's an incredibly potent drug. And I had Dr. Nicole Avena in my group for the cohort that you guys put together. And she has over 70 published papers that show its effects on the brain. And there's new research that shows that heroin shows the same exact low energy brain or insulin resistant brain that sugar addiction shows. It's a brain disease. It's not something that somebody can control. It's a drug. And when sometimes that brain crosses that line, you use that one time and you cross over from harmful use to addiction. And that's a whole different animal. It's just a whole different animal.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your experience of your own story and also telling us about SUGARx Global.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.